Hi everybody, welcome to another episode of Exploring Photography. I'm Mark Wallace, hanging out with Sara.
Hi.
Today's episode is brought to you by AiArty, image enhancement software. It's really spectacular stuff. I'll be getting to that in a little bit. Today's episode is all about this thing. This is a ColorChecker Passport. What the heck is this and why do you use it? Well, this is for accurate color. You can use it to create color profiles. You can use it to set your white balance. You can use it to tune things in, make them a little bit warmer or cooler based on what you're shooting, skin tones or scenic tones. You can see what's changing in your image. There's a bunch of stuff you can do with this. And so we're gonna take a couple of quick pictures and then I'm gonna hop over into Lightroom and show you how I use this. Now this has a couple of different things. It's got all the colors on here, those little color palettes. And it also has a little mini white and gray card. So we can use this not only for color, but to set our white balance and to make sure our exposure is correct. A lot of stuff. So what we're gonna do is I'm gonna have Sara hop over here. We're gonna take a photo and she is gonna hold this right next to her face like this. And the reason for that is you want this to be where you're taking the photo, as close as possible. So if I'm working with models, I always have them hold it right next to their face or right in front, but usually right next. That way I can see the colors and I can see what it's doing to their skin. And so the other thing to mention is when you're holding this, you should not touch these colors because the oil on your hands can mess up the color over time. So that's why I'm holding it like this. Okay, Sara knows all this. There you go, lista? Okay, por favor, aquí. What we're gonna do is, I've already metered everything, set this up. We are going to take a really fast photo. And so right there, see? Perfecto. I'm gonna zoom in all the way, take a shot. Perfecta. And then the other thing I'm gonna do is we are gonna change this so we have our white balance, so we can set that really fast if we need to. Gracias. One more photo. Okay. Perfect. Good, 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 good. I'm gonna get as close as possible. Great. Perfecta. All right, now that we have that, what we need to do is to hop into post-production and start using this. We can use our ColorChecker Passport for a lot of different things, but at a very basic level, the things we would use it for most is setting our white balance and checking our exposure. We also have a bunch of different little things on this ColorChecker to check our color at the top, our basic color sliders, warm or cool, our white balance, check our shadows, midtones, and highlights down here. And then this is for doing color profiles, some really interesting things. And so we're gonna go from the very basic stuff to the most advanced things. We're gonna start with white balance, warming and cooling, doing that intelligently, checking our exposure, midtones, highlights, shadows, all of that kind of stuff. And then we'll talk a little bit about how we can use the ColorChecker Passport for a complete workflow of calibration, color calibration, making sure that our camera is calibrated for correct color, making sure that our screen is calibrated correctly, and also making sure that the output, our printer or working with a lab, that complete workflow. Now, we're not gonna do an in-depth dive on color profiling and ICC profiles and all that stuff. That deserves a different video. We're gonna stick to the basics of what the ColorChecker Passport is used for, starting with white balance and exposure. So to do this, we are gonna hop over here into Lightroom Classic. This is what I use most of the time to do my post-production, but the principles that I'm gonna show you today can be applied to Capture One, DxO Photo Lab, Lightroom Classic, Lightroom, Adobe Camera Raw, whatever you're using for your post-production, you can do the same things. They all work basically the same with the ColorChecker Passport. And so let's hop into Lightroom Classic right now. And what we're gonna do is we're gonna look at this photo shoot that I just did with Sara. So these are the photos that I just took. You can see that we have our color checker here. We have our white balance, our gray and white card here. But you'll also notice that I'm just gonna show you that this is not something that I've just done one time. This is a photo shoot that I did a few years ago, and you can see that I've got, for every different lighting setup, I have a ColorChecker Passport. So this portfolio, or this portrait right here, I've got a color checker. This one I've got a color checker. For this one I have a color checker. Basically for anything that I'm shooting, any different lighting setup, I am using a shot of that color checker. So that's an important thing we want to do, is every time we change our light, if it's a modifier, if it's a different, maybe a scrim or something like that, if we're shooting in natural light, anytime we change the light, we need to make sure that we capture a nice color checker image. The other thing to note is when you're capturing this, I'll see if I can get this to focus. Notice that we can get a glare if I point this in the wrong direction. So you need to be sort of cognizant of that when you're shooting, to try to make sure you get the model to hold this where it's nice and flat toward the camera with no glare on that to get the best results. And so just be aware of that when you're taking your photos. Okay, back over here into Lightroom Classic, we can see that I have all of these different profiles. You can even see, just to make my point, if I go up here to this right here, we have, and Dawn Berger, she is just a hoot. She got so tired of taking pictures with the color checker, she was making funny faces. But notice we have her doing this, where she's doing the check. And then right after that, we have another image. And the reason for that is if you look closely, you can see that up here, the lighting has changed. So this doesn't have those kicker lights, this does. So as soon as we changed the lighting setup, we also made sure to capture another shot of that color checker. Okay, we're gonna work with the stuff that we just shot with Sara. So let's hop over here into that photo shoot that we just did with Sara, beginning with the most basic thing, and that is to check the white balance and to check the exposure. Now we have in here, we have a white card and we have a gray card. The middle gray card will help us with exposure. In fact, if you look up here, you'll see that there are values that change when I go to the develop module. So I'm gonna go over here to the develop module, and then when I hover over this with my magnifying glass, whatever tool you're in, notice over here, we get a readout for red, green, and blue. Notice that right now, they all show 50%. So red 50.6, green 50.6, blue 50.6. So it's middle gray. It is a middle gray. If those values showed me something that was different than 50%, I would know that I'm either underexposed or overexposed, and I can make an adjustment. We can even look on our histogram and see that we have this spike right here showing that this is the correct exposure. In fact, if I crop this to only show that middle gray, so I'll show that. So I'm just getting the gray card. Look at this spike right here. It is absolutely spot on. So I know I have a correct exposure. If I change this and I take it down one stop or up one stop, you can see that spike on the histogram is changing. It should be dead center for this gray area of the top of the card. So I'm going to reset my crop. So we know just by looking at that we have a correct exposure. If we did the same thing, if I just crop here on the white part of this, and I'll close that, you can see that the spike is over here to the right. It's not absolutely white, but that's okay. We don't want it to be totally blown out. We can check that. We can also check to see, I'll reset this. When I hover over this with my magnifying glass, you can see that those values are the same, 91, 91, 91. So that helps us with our exposure. We can also go in here, choose our white balance tool. So I'll click on that, bring it over here, click, and then our white balance is set. I could do that again on the white, click, our white balance is set. So these we can just use, if nothing else, you can use these two things to set your white balance and to check your exposure. So at the very basic, if you just want to use a gray card, you can use that panel. But we really want to control things in a more intelligent way and really see what's happening. That's where the other cards really come into play. Let's take a moment to learn about the sponsor of this episode, AiArty. AiArty is an amazing image enhancement tool. And with AiArty, you can effortlessly improve the quality of your photos by removing blur, noise, and pixelation with 3 distinct AI models for super resolution. It only takes one click to enhance blurry, grainy, pixelated, and soft images while generating more details using AI. This is great for restoring compressed or highly pixelated files. Use deep learning algorithms to remove noise and reconstruct your images. You can fix issues caused by high ISO, underexposure, or noise from highly compressed files. Improve the clarity, sharpness, and overall visual quality of your work. Use AiArty to preserve and generate image details. It's perfect for generating skin, hair, textures, lines, and other fine details. The lower the quality of the image, the greater the potential for improvement. Make your images more detailed and natural by emphasizing edges and fine details without creating artifacts. A big thank you to AiArty for sponsoring this episode. For more information about AiArty and to download the software, click the link in the description of this video. All right, let's get back to it. So let's go to the next exposure, this one right here. This is the next thing. And let me make sure I reset everything so I don't have any adjustments being made. Everything is as shot, our white balance. Everything is as it came out of the camera. Looking at this, I can see just with my naked eye that there's this reddish cast to this image. So there's a lot of red in this. Her hair looks red. If we look really closely to her skin tones, these shadows are reddish. And so we shouldn't have all that red. You can see even right here, this is a red shadow. That shouldn't be red. It should be a gray, or skin tone. So we shouldn't have that red color cast there. So we got to figure out what's going on. So the first thing I want to do is I want to set my color temperature, my white balance. And to do this, notice we have these two rows on the top of the card. The top one, notice we have these two different people here. We have one with a little sun and one with a big sun. Notice it has got a little sun here. This has a notch out of it. And then this has a plus and another plus and another plus. And then this is a big sun right there. So what this is doing for us is it is allowing us to set the correct white balance. So that's the little square with a notch out of it. We can click on that with our color correction tool, with our white balance color picker, and that will set the color temperature correctly. Our white balance will be set correctly. But if we want to warm things up a little bit, we can click either the first or second or third or fourth of those little pluses to make things a little bit warmer. Maybe give somebody a tan that's a little bit pasty. We can do that. And what that's doing with that top row here, this top row here, it's going to warm and cool things in a way that's pleasing for skin tones. The other row right below that is this right here. Notice it's got a mountain range. Whoops. Notice it's got a mountain range set to it. Whoops, I'm doing the wrong thing here. It has, there we go. It's got a little mountain range with an icicle on it. If I go over here, it's got a mountain range with a sun on it. And so what this row does is it allows us to set the correct color temperature, another square with a notch out of it, and we can cool things off or warm things up. So this top one is for portraits, for setting color temperature. This one is for setting color temperature for scenic photos. So it will warm and cool things with the colors biased toward greens and blues, things that are in nature. So the reds and those tones are for portraits, and greens and blues are for scenic photos. So those two different rows help us set and adjust in an intelligent way the white balance for portraits or scenic photos. Now, I'm a portrait photographer, so I'm almost always going to be using that top row. Let's see how that works. So the reason that I like to take a photo right next to the model's face is I can see really quickly what's happening to the skin tones. So I'm going to go over here. I'm going to choose my color temperature, my white balance selector. I'll choose that. I'm going to go over here. I'm going to click on the square that's got the notch in it. Click. And you can see immediately things changed. So before, after, before, after, before, after. If we look, I'll try, I don't know if on YouTube this is going to show up, but on my screen you can see a huge difference before, after of those reds in the skin. So the reds are really changing. You can also look at this before and after to see how things are changing. You can see things changing here. These two squares, by the way, represent skin tones. And so light skin and darker skin, we can see if those are correct. And these squares right here represent colors in nature. So sky, water, plants, etc. So these are for skin tones. These help us understand what's happening in nature. So we can see pretty quickly what's happening there. So we've got that. The other thing we have is this row right here on our color checker. And these aren't by accident, these colors right here. These colors correspond to the colors in our color mixer over here. So notice we have red, orange, yellow, green, aqua blue, purple, magenta. That corresponds exactly to this: red, orange, yellow, green, aqua, blue, purple, and magenta. In fact, we can go over here. We can choose our color picker, and notice it's picking on the right-hand side the correct color that corresponds with that. So there's the red, there is the orange and the yellow, and so we can see exactly what's happening when we move color sliders here, what's happening up here. We can see it. So I'm going to go ahead and reset all this because I don't want to mess up all my color. So those are back to 0. Okay, so that's what these are up here. These correspond to the hue, saturation, luminance, all of those sliders correspond to this. So we can see what's happening in a profile on a target when we adjust this. It really helps us out. So one of my favorite things. Okay, so we have, we've set our color temperature. Let me just show you what happens when I warm this up. So +1, +2, +3, +4. You can see that's getting much redder. And this is cooler, 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 and then technically correct. And so the ColorChecker Passport allows you to choose something that is technically correct. So academically, it's the correct color temperature, but it also has patches on there that you can click to change the color temperature to be more artistically warmer or cooler. It's fantastic. It really will save you a lot of time. So there are a number of other things that we can do here. On this row right here, what we have there is we have our blacks and shadows on this side. And then here we have our highlights and whites. And so if we want to adjust things here, our tone, shadows, highlights, blacks, etc., when we adjust them, we can see what's happening on our target right here. We can actually see if it's black is black, or if the shadows are opened up, and we get different graduations of different tones there. And so that helps us do things in an intelligent way so that we're not messing things up. And we can also go in and we can crop so that our histogram is only showing those things. So we can see exactly where the blackest black is and where the brightest shadow is. So we can see if it's in the right place, which in this instance, we don't have anything that's absolutely black here. We only have shadows. So we might have to go in here and change our blacks just a little bit to bring that in. We might want to do that. It's up to you. That stuff is subjective, but this allows you to see what's happening in a real way. So we can see exactly what's going on there. Okay, that is fantastic. So just with that tool, we can really quickly go in, set our white balance, change our shadows, midtones, and highlights to see what's happening. But there's one more thing that we should do when it comes to color. In fact, we should do it first, and that is choosing our color profiles. These are called different things in different cameras. So they might be picture style or film look or color profile. Depending on what brand of camera you have, it's called something different, but it's essentially the same thing for all cameras. You're saying you want to emulate a different look, a different film look. And that tells the camera how to interpret the colors that we're seeing. Do we want it to be more contrasty? We want it to be more saturated, less saturated? Do we want it to be biased more towards skin tones or toward nature? How do we want to see that? So let me show you what that looks like in Lightroom Classic. When we go back over here, I'm going to zoom out on this. On the right-hand side, we have this color profile. So right now it's set to camera portrait. And the reason it's set to camera portrait is that's what I had my camera set to when I took those photos. And so we can change that. We can change it to whatever we want it to be. So we can have it to be Adobe Color or Adobe Landscape or Adobe Portrait or Vivid or whatever. We've got all of these different things. And in Lightroom Classic, we have this little Explorer here. So we can hover over these different color profiles and see what things look like. So watch what happens over here on this area of the color checker when I change the profile. You can see the colors shifting pretty dramatically. So if I go to camera neutral to portrait, you can see over here, in fact, I'll zoom in on it just a little bit so you can see this. Look what's happening in the blues. We can see things shifting as, look at that, the red, boink, doink, doink. So we can see things, oh, look at that. That's a big shift as well. So we can see what's happening when we change profiles. Look at that blue. Look at this blue right here when I go from faithful to landscape. Faithful to landscape. Notice that the blues are getting much more saturated. The greens are getting much more saturated. That top row is changing as opposed to going from faithful to portrait. So we can see what's happening in that. It's really, really wonderful. So we can choose something that is appropriate for our photo, and it works great. But, so that's all the artistic stuff. We set the white balance, we set the shadows, the midtones, the highlights. We use our color checker to see what's happening in that image. We're seeing where colors are shifting when we're changing the sliders, and it gives us an intelligent view. But what if we need accurate color? For example, over here in this photo shoot here, in my sample photos, what if I'm taking a photo of, for example, this blue dress? So I've got this blue dress, and perhaps this is something that's going to be sold. And so a client comes to you and says, hey, can you take a photo of this blue dress and this red dress and this outfit, this bag, this product, whatever it is. And then that has to be accurate, because you don't want somebody going online and buying a blue dress and then it shows up and it's a different color. They'd be upset, or especially if it's in a print catalog or on a billboard or on a sign. People want to see, like, if that's the color of the thing I'm ordering, that's what I'm getting in the mail. And so what we need to do is we need to make sure that the colors that we see with our eyes, if the red that we see with our eyes is captured correctly in the camera, so that the camera is seeing the red the same way that we're seeing the red. And then when we bring it into the computer screen is showing that red the same way. So the red that we see is the same red that the camera captures, and when we bring it into the computer screen is showing the exact same red, and then when we print that dress or whatever the product is, that red is the same. How do we make sure that the red comes in the camera as red, shows up on screen as the same red, and prints out the same red? What we have to do in that instance is we have to profile our camera, we have to profile our screen, we have to profile our printer. The entire thing has to be profiled. And so that's what we have these targets for. And so these are accurate colors. That's why you don't touch them with your fingers, because we want the colors to be as accurate as possible. So this red needs to show up on the computer screen the exact same way. You should be able to hold this next to your computer screen. The red should be red, and when you make a print, that red should be exactly the same thing. So what we can do is we can take our ColorChecker Passport and say, hey, camera, if this focuses, focus. If this will focus, there we go. We could say, hey, camera, this red is red. That is what I'm saying is red. This is blue. This is green. This is the standard to measure that by. And what we can do is we can create a color profile. And to do that with the ColorChecker Passport, what we want to do is we want to use this thing over here. So we can go over to Calibrate, who makes the ColorChecker Passport, and we need to download this, which is the ColorChecker display. In fact, I can go in here and say ColorChecker Camera Calibration, and it's this software that opens up. So this software allows you to go through a few different ways to create profiles, accurate profiles. But when you install this software, and by the way, this link here, I'll put this in the description of the video, or you can look on the screen here. Not only is it the software for creating display calibrations, but camera calibrations, print calibrations, all that stuff. these profiles are here. That's where you download all of this stuff. When you install that, something happens in Lightroom Classic. And so let's go back over here to Sara. And so we want to tell the Lightroom that this is the accurate color. This stuff that we just captured here, this is the accurate color, and we want to create a profile for that. What I can do is I can say File, and then I can go to Export with Preset, and then I have a preset down here called ColorChecker Camera Calibration. That happens when you install that software. It installs this plugin for Lightroom Classic. If I click on that, I can then name this profile. So I'm going to name this Sara in plants, Sara plants. We'll do that. Now you have to do this with the correct photo. So you have to have a photo of the color checker to do this. So I've got that selected. I'm exporting this as a DNG profile. I'm naming it Sara plants. I will say save. Now what's happening is this is going to export this file. It is going to open the camera calibration software. It's going to bounce around it and do its thing. It takes about 10 or 15 seconds, something like that. And then just in a second here, this is going to pop up with a message that says everything is done. So it takes about 15 or 20 seconds. So we'll just wait for this to zip around. It's still doing its thing. So we're waiting here. And then once this is done, I can apply that color profile. Okay, so it's done. It's saying, hey, the color checker camera calibration is done, but Lightroom must be restarted to activate the profile. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to quit Lightroom. Yes, I'm going to quit. It's going to do all my backups, all that kind of stuff. So Lightroom is closing. The reason you have to do that is when Lightroom launches, there's a directory on your hard drive that stores all of those different profiles. And so it loads them in when it launches. And so what I'm going to do now is I'm going to go over here. I'm going to relaunch Lightroom Classic. And so I'm relaunching Lightroom Classic here. It's going to open up. Dun, dun, dun. And it'll resume from where we left off. There it is. Now over in the develop module, something new is happening. If I go over to my profiles here, if I click on this, notice now I have Sara plants. This right there, that's the one we just created. I can click on that. And now I will also set my white balance. So now I have a correct color temperature and a correct color profile. Remember we had this shadow here that was red. Now look at that and notice it is the correct skin tone. So I'm going to show you before, after. Look at how much red came out of that. We can see that her skin tone is now accurate. It's not all that weirdness. And we can see how much has changed in our color profile. Look at that, a ton. So that's before, that's after, before, after. So a lot changed in that profile, specifically with the blues and the purples. Wow, lots. Before, after, before, after. Okay, now that we have that, we have a technically correct color. All of our colors are technically correct. We can still adjust the contrast. We can still adjust things to taste, but we know if we applied that to a blue dress, that now the blue that came from the real world came into our camera. We know that because we have calibrated that camera, it's showing up correctly on our screen. What we need to do is we need to calibrate our screen. For those of you who are wondering, I use this guy right here. If I can get it focused, this is a Calibrate Display Plus HL. It allows me to calibrate the screen using this little thing. And then also this allows us, if I can open this, to, you can calibrate projectors. It can also look at ambient light to make sure that the screen is calibrated for changes in the ambient light, all kinds of stuff. I absolutely love this. If you're interested in all that camera calibration and screen calibration, I highly recommend you zip over here. Calibrate does not sponsor any of this, but I recommend that you go over here and take a look at this. I highly recommend the Display Plus HL. that is for newer displays. So those HDR displays, the really bright displays, the newer Apple displays, you need something that can get the entire dynamic range. So the Pro and Plus HL are made for that. And then also I use the ColorChecker Studio for my more advanced commercial work. And then you can see we've got calibration targets and all kinds of stuff. So I'll leave links to all this. Calibrate is not paying me for any of this stuff, but I use their gear all the time for color accurate work. So the bottom line for all of this is you will use the ColorChecker to calibrate and create a camera profile. You bring that into Lightroom Classic so that the colors are correct. You would calibrate your monitor to make sure that the colors showing on your monitor match that profile, to make sure that red is red. That's what you're seeing. Everything is correct. And then you would also calibrate your printer or use the labs profiles to make sure that when you print, everything is consistent across. Again, this is not a color profile video, but we had to dip our toes into that so you could understand why you would use the ColorChecker Passport for that. Okay, so the bottom line is this. The ColorChecker Passport is something that I absolutely love. You can use it for exposure, for white balance. That's what I use for most of my photo shoots, just to quickly make sure everything is good. And you can also create profiles to make sure you have the most accurate color. The last thing is, what do you do once you have all of that stuff in your photos? So let's say we have this done. Let's say we've gone in and we've changed our blacks to make sure that we've got a nice contrast there. And we've got our highlights set. We have set everything the way we want it to be set. How then do we apply that to everything else? That's really easy. We just take our first image, the one that we did all of our calibration to, then shift click to all the other ones, and then we can click sync settings. And then for this, you can just say, hey, I want to do the basic treatment and profile and the basic white balance exposure, all that. And so this is choosing process version, which is good. And then calibration, we want to choose that. Okay, so all of that's there. If you've done some color mixer stuff, color grading, of course, you would choose that as well. So you choose whatever is necessary, but by default, you need to choose treatment and profile and these basic adjustments and the calibration and the process version. So those need to be selected to apply all the colors. And then you just say synchronize, and boom, it's going to synchronize all the colors across all of the different images. And now all of the images have the correct color, the correct saturation, everything. So we can see, if I go in here to this one, to the develop module, before, after, look at the difference in the reds. That is crazy. Let's see if we can show this side by side. Yeah, look at how much more red the one on the left has than the one on the right. That's crazy. Especially look at this. Even in the pants, we can see the pants have a red color cast, and the correct profile, the pants are set. So you wouldn't even see that, I don't think, if you hadn't done a calibration. It's really, really amazing. All right, well, now we know all about the ColorChecker Passport, how we can use that to set our white balance and change colors and create profiles and all those good things. Gracias para ti, Sara, tú es perfecto modelo. She's fantastic. If you want to see more of Sara's work, check out her Instagram profile. I have set a link in the description of this video. Also, make sure you subscribe. If you haven't subscribed already and turned on the bell, why not do that? Also, thank you to AiArty for sponsoring this video. It wouldn't be possible without them and our channel members. If you're not a member, if you're not part of the Snap family, check that out. There's a link in the description of this video. Long form classes for those who want more in-depth teaching. So you might want to check that out. Thanks so much for joining us. Gracias para ti. And I will see you again next time.